The girl received a gift from her fiancé. It was a gold coin with the face of an unknown man engraved on it. "What is this?" The fiancé looked around cautiously. There were only rocks and sheep all around him, but he spoke fearfully, fearing that someone might hear. "This is the Emperor's gold coin." "The Emperor's gold coin?" "Yeah. Do you know the Messenger clan?" "Oh, Soulless ones?" The Herald clan is a legendary race known by various hideous names, including the Kingslayer, the Soulless, and the Ominous. The name of the uneducated girl was often heard in stories intended to frighten children. Yes, this gold coin can command those Soulless ones, but be careful. They say that just having it will get you executed by the inquisitors of the King's Church. Huh? The girl was so surprised that she almost dropped the gold coin. "Why are you giving me such a dangerous thing as a gift?" "Ha ha ha. I'm surprised, but you never know. If something happens to us, they say if you draw a triangle on the ground and put a gold coin in the center, the heralds will come and help you." The fiancé said so and smiled. "I hope that doesn't happen, though." It was an especially sunny day. Knight Jibek was worried whether the girl would be able to survive the day. But he couldn't show his worry on his face next to Kozel, the son of the Count. "Hey, teacher smile. Isn't it fun?" Kozel drew water from the dry well and poured it over himself. "If you kill the people, you can't collect taxes. If you let disgruntled wanderers roam around, the number of bandits will increase. Your Majesty, there are other fertile lands. If you evacuate the people there, they will be able to endure the drought. Why should the children born in that fertile land bear the brunt of the damage caused by these wicked men? Why not give this land to the children born in the fertile land? They have done meritorious deeds, and these have committed transgressions." Farming is not determined by one's ability. It is determined by the soil climate and sky. And the light of the king's flower determines. Isn't that the teaching of the King's Church? The reason they are suffering from drought is because they are disloyal to the King's Church. Isn't that what the doctrine says? This is an exaggerated interpretation. Although Zibek had declared so, he who was of low status, even in the King's Church, could not resist this Prince Kozel, who had the blood of a god flowing in his veins. The population of the border area was large compared to the cultivated land. Rather than letting the inhabitants of a land that was dry run away and become nomads causing chaos in the public sphere, it was more profitable to kill them on the land, confiscate their property, and then later relocate new people here. Kozel came here to exercise the will of such a changeling count. The townspeople did not know the inside story and believed that if they just remained quiet and did not resist, they would be spared, and that those who died until now were paying the price for daring to resist the great nobles. "I am doing this to save the people, sir. If you want to save them even by disobeying my orders, then try it yourself." Ha 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 ha. The soldiers were laughing. They were happy to distribute the loot and eat meat and wine. The son of the Count Kozel was a really good employer for them. He took the lead in looting and gave them a lot of loot so they couldn't help but be loyal. However, all of this was unbearably unpleasant for the paladin Jibek. However, his duty as a paladin bound him. That night, Jibek headed to the village entrance to help the girl again. Soon, he frowned. Despite the treatment and help last night, she couldn't make it through today. The girl lies dead on the floor while her husband dances in the wind to the sound of an eerie breeze. "You couldn't hold out in the end. If this is the case, even if I call the real Messenger clan, it's useless." Sir Jibek muttered like that, then suddenly realized that he was feeling regretful. About what? As a knight belonging to the King's Church, did you really expect the Herald clan, who are considered blasphemous even to mention, to come and execute that Count's son? That's stupid. Sir Jibek sighed and approached the fallen girl. That was it. Shrung. The sharp blade was already at his neck. "Stop. If you move, I'll cut you. Don't even look this way," the young man's voice warned him. Sir Jibek was startled by the blade suddenly striking his vital spot. How could he suddenly hold a knife to his own throat in this desolate place where there was clearly no one but a few trees? This is truly a ghostly act. "Are you a messenger clan? Really?" "That's true. You don't seem like a petitioner. Are you a knight, a member of the Rescue Knights? This is the Jebek of the King's Church. Ah. There was disappointment in the young man's voice. I'm asking just in case, but you're not the petitioner, are you? Well, it would be quite amusing if a knight of the King's Church were to make a petition. Are you trying to insult me? Lord Jebek was furious. The petitioner is dead. Well, I got some gold for free, but can you tell me what's going on? If you take the knife from my neck and give me some space, I will stake my honor on telling you what happened. You seem confident that you wouldn't have been defeated so easily if you hadn't been ambushed. Well, that's good. A knight of the King's Church should have that much guts. For a moment, the young man's body became blurry and he was already out of the first field. That's amazing. Sir Jebek was astonished by his opponent's movements. Is it a ghost or magic? Are you a wizard? All the messengers are magicians, except for me. It's not magic. Superhuman physical strength is difficult to distinguish from magic. I don't know what you're talking about. What is your name? What is your rank as a messenger? I have already told you my name. I am the Jebek of the King's Church. Oh, is that so? Excuse me. I am Azadin, the 108th messenger of the Emperor. In the Eastern dialect, I am called Asahdin. The young man spoke thus and greeted me gracefully. He was a very tall young man wearing a hat with pheasant feathers and a bird-shaped mask covering his eyes and nose. If it's the 108th commandment. The Emperor's messengers number at most 108. In other words, the messenger in front of you right now is the lowest among the messengers. However, judging by the distance he has just made, he is no ordinary person. Then, as promised, tell me what happened. That. Jebek told what he knew about what had happened to the girl's family. Oh, that's right. Azadin of the Messenger clan clicked his tongue after hearing the story. Then an owl flew in and landed in front of Azadin. The contract has already been established. The gold is yours. 108th Azadin. Move on to another mission. The moment he heard the bird's voice, Lord Jebek was startled. It was unusual for a bird to speak, but the content of the speech puzzled him even more. Are you just going to take the payment and leave when the petitioner dies? Ah, so that means the Holy Knight of the King's Church wants the petition to be granted. If the petition is granted, something bad will happen to your master the Count's son? Ugh. Sir Jebek, who had just spoken, realized his slip of the tongue and drew his sword. That won't happen, you ungodly soulless one. I will strike you down. Should I stop? Azadin smiled bitterly as he looked at the knight pointing his sword at him. Aren't you sad that you want to shed your own blood with the sword that was silent in the face of injustice? Are you angry? At whom? At me, or at yourself for remaining silent in the face of injustice? What do you know? I am ignorant, but I know more than you think. Azadin pointed to the sky. Do you know the constellations in the night sky? What are the myths associated with their names? What on earth are you talking about? What are you trying to say? Sir Jebek was taken aback by Azadin's sudden absurd remark. What is this ungodly man talking about now? Depending on whether a person has a sense of beauty or not, they may feel different things when looking at the same thing. For some, the main character of a myth is just a pale, small light flickering in the darkness, but it's nothing more than that. Azadin pointed to the corpses. Just like how the other soldiers saw them being trampled and how you saw them. No difference. Because I couldn't do anything. No, that's not true. You treated the petitioner and waited for me. But I am a knight of the King's Church. I must revere those who inherit the blood of the new king. I don't want to fight you, Paladin. If you took pity on the girl, your sword is not my enemy. Azadin turned his back when Lord Jebek remained silent. It was a good situation to strike with his sword, but Lord Jebek did not want to swing his sword at this herald. At that moment, Azadin's hand moved. The swordlight flashed, the ropes of the willow tree snapped, and the hanging corpses fell. Azadin lightly caught the adult male's corpse from the air with one hand, then extended one of his legs to catch the falling corpse and lower it to the ground. It was an amazing display of martial arts and swordsmanship. Although Lord Jibek was confident in his own abilities, he could tell that the being in front of him was a monster that was several levels above him. Is this really the Messenger clan? With this kind of power, killing him wouldn't be difficult, right? Do you have a shovel? A shovel? Are you going to bury them? Sir Jibek was puzzled. The messenger had already received the gold. Now that the petitioners were dead, there was no longer any obligation to look after them. He was going to bury their bodies? What can I do without it? Azzedine began to dig the ground with his back to Lord Jibek. Are you really planning to bury the body? The very act of doing so is no different from a challenge to Prince Kozel. Corpses hang from trees everywhere, and an evil magic turns them into undead, making the corpses scream even in death. Prince Kozel will try to confirm his power through the undead hanging from the tree. He will not stay still if someone is having a funeral in the middle of it, especially if it is a messenger clan. By the time Sir Jibek was panicking, he had already dug a hole large enough for one person to lie down in and buried the body in it. Ah! Lord Jibek could not bring himself to point his sword at the sight. How could he point his sword at the sight of corpses left hanging from trees to rot and decay, not even respected as human beings hung as flags to satisfy the tyrant's sadism and then lowered to the ground for a funeral? Thinking about it like that, I suddenly felt so cowardly and insignificant. Aren't I the one who swore allegiance to and served the tyrants who committed such terrible acts? Sir Jibek sheathed his sword, approached Azzedine, and began digging the ground with his hands. The knights of the king's church and the young men of the heralds dug the ground together and buried the victims. Azzedine clasped his hands together before the victims who were buried in this way. Jibek was startled for a moment. He suspected that the young man might have buried it to deceive people with some heretical sorcery. The eloquent words just now might have been a trick to deceive him. Of course that would be the case since he was a member of the evil emperor's followers, the Herald clan. But this young man said something unexpected. Archangel of wisdom, courage, and mercy, have pity on me. Surprisingly, the young man began to recite the prayer of the Rescue Knights. Rescue Knights? I was born into the Herald clan, but I liked the ideology of the Salvation Knights. What a reckless man. Are you saying that you have abandoned the destiny of the clan you were born into and serve the heretical beliefs? If I don't do what I believe is right, there would be no point in being born. He's a strange guy. He never tries to give up on a single word he says, but I find myself being swayed by his old words, which are unusual for a young guy. What the heck is this guy? While Sir Jibek watched, Azzedine held a funeral for the dead with the prayers of the Knights of Salvation. It may be a simple and hasty funeral, but it will at least prevent them from becoming undead. Those who die unjustly without a funeral are likely to become undead. But will a funeral held in the style of the Salvation Knights really be effective for him, a member of the Herald clan? Is his faith real? The Knights Templar were a sect that worshipped the three archangels who protected virtue, and they claimed that regardless of birth status, one could obtain white magic by upholding the three virtues of wisdom, courage, and mercy. The King's Church, which defined itself as the only religion by its ruling ideology, originally intended to condemn and punish the Knights Templar as heretics. However, when the monsters from the sea came rushing in, the rescue knights stopped them with grenades and carried out relief activities for the poor, so the support of the people was very great. Moreover, many noble children joined the Knights Templar, so their bloodlines became mixed and mingled. And now the King's Church and the Knights Templar had similar personalities and could not be designated as heretics. The relationship between the Knights Templar and the Church of the King was established on a friendly basis, with the Knights Templar respecting the divine kings held sacred by the Church of the King, and the Church of the King not interfering with the beliefs of the Knights Templar. Do you really have faith in the Salvation Knights, to the point where they can stop the undead? Are you being too suspicious? What do you like about the Rescue Knights? I like the idea that a person's nobility is determined not by their birth, but by their beliefs and actions. just as someone who rapes and massacres people because he was born with the blood of a king is not noble. "You bastard!" Zebek was indignant at Azzadin's words, realizing that they were mocking his faith, but he was reluctant to draw his sword on him after the two of them had buried the people together. At that moment, Azzadin untied the belt-like thing he was wearing around his waist. Looking closely, it was a bow. He had wrapped it around his waist like a belt because the bowstring would bend backwards if he untied it. He quickly drew the bowstring with his skillful technique, took out the quiver from his backpack, untied the leather strap that had secured the arrow, and hung the quiver diagonally on his waist. "Are you trying to fight? This is better." It was a strangely appealing herald clan. However, that was difficult. To the Knights of the King's Church, the herald clan was an enemy that had to be dealt with. It would have been better to act in a clear manner against them. But the enemy Azzadin was preparing for was not him. The torch was approaching. "What teacher? You really liked that woman? If that's the case, then tell me." Kozel was leading his men and rushing forward, muttering, "Well, it was a shame to stay in this worthless countryside." Prince Kozel's men drew their spears. "But who is that kid?" The soldiers were approaching, muttering. There were quite a few of them. No, all of Prince Kozel's men were coming fully armed. Seeing that they were all heavily armed and had come at this ambitious hour, perhaps they had realized that Lord Zebek was looking after the girl. No, that would be certain. "It'll be difficult." Lord Zebek clicked his tongue inwardly. Prince Kozel's men were armed with a mixture of plate armor and chainmail. They were armed better than the average knight. Even though he was confident in his own abilities, there was no way he could do anything when faced with 20 heavily armed men like this. What's more, wasn't the messenger in front of him wearing light armor? Then Azzadin started to move. In an instant, arrows flew and aimed at the soldiers in the front line. It was a quick shot that would have left ordinary soldiers helpless. The soldiers that Prince Kozel carried were no less skilled than experienced knights. They had already prepared their shields. They were skilled enough to be accustomed to pillaging and murder. "Wedge!" Azzadin's arrow tore through the wind, dodging the shields of the soldiers in the vanguard and flying like a living snake. "Puck!" Surprisingly, the arrows hit the spearmen approaching from behind the shield-bearers. "You!" The spearmen's faces were torn off. Arrows had nicked their helmets and torn them off, blowing out their noses and eyes. "No!" It's amazing how the arrows twist and fly through the air, and their power is incredible. How strong of a bow would it take to be able to do this? While Sir Zebek was amazed, Azzadin drew his arrow again and pulled back the bowstring, firing one arrow into the sky and the other at the shield-bearer. The soldier who thoughtlessly raised his shield to block the flying arrow was shocked by the tremendous shock that paralyzed his arm at that moment. He had only blocked the arrow, but it went through the shield and stabbed him in the lower abdomen, or rather in the genitals. There was another surprising thing. Puck! An arrow fell from the sky and struck his collarbone. 2 arrows hit the target simultaneously. Quack! I roll around in excruciating pain in my genitals and shoulders. That's ridiculous. What's with that bow? It makes the armor look like a piece of paper. Suppress him so he can't shoot the arrow. Everyone rushed at Azzadin, but he stepped back and fired arrows repeatedly. He was moving back so fast that the soldiers running forward were unable to close the distance and were trampled by the arrows. Puck, my eyeballs are flying out. 2 a tap. Break your knees. All the pursuing soldiers noticed. This guy wasn't trying to kill them. He was trying to leave them with permanent disabilities. Is he crazy? Even if you try to kill him, you won't have enough arrows. The soldiers felt relieved that their opponent was wasting arrows uselessly, but they also felt fear. The anger they felt from him was not ordinary. What happens if I get hit by that guy and lose my eye? They will be even more helpless than the farmers they were just plundering. Will I be able to endure it then? It's okay. I'm out of arrows, Prince Kozel encouraged the frightened soldiers. Azzadin's talisman seemed empty and dangling. The arrows had really run out. Good. The surviving soldiers approached Azzadin. How is it? I ran out of arrows. Then what? Azzadin struck the rushing soldier in the face with his fist. Huh? The helmet shattered with a single punch and the shrapnel shattered the soldier's eyeball. Everyone was shocked to see the soldier spinning around and falling down, blood flowing from his eye. I've reduced their numbers to a reasonable level with arrows. If you have the courage, come and see. Azzadin unstringed the bow, returned it to its original shape, and slung it around his waist like a belt, then picked up the soldier's sword that had fallen on the ground. Oh, I almost forgot. He had just stabbed the soldier between the legs with his sword, blinding him with his fist. It may have seemed like a casual stab, but it was a precise blow, almost like a surgical operation. Why on earth are you so obsessed with castration? He's crazy. The soldiers were frozen by the cruel sight. She is also a messenger clan. Sir Jebek, who had followed along in a hurry, shouted without thinking. What? That messenger clan? A soulless one? Some people knew about the rumors of the messenger clan, but is this guy in front of them the messenger clan? Don't be scared, you little punks. If you run away, I'll kill you with my own hands. If you're going to die anyway, the only way for you to survive is to take that guy down. Confucius threatened the soldiers, but Azzadin moved and swung his sword at the soldiers. Who covered your eyes? Blindfolded soldiers have their genitals cut off, kicked, and their knees broken. If their faces are exposed due to the pain, a sword will inevitably fly towards their eyeballs and gouge them out. This kind of task is much more complex and difficult than killing him with a single blow, so it is natural that weaknesses will be revealed. But everyone was unable to surround Azzadin. What? Where did the window go? That is... The spearmen could not keep their spears as they kept up with the speed at which Azzadin was running backwards. Furthermore, those holding spears were already being swept by Azzadin's barrage of arrows, and most of the spearmen had already been eliminated. This kid was planning this from the beginning.